Hi, I'm Pau. I'm a documentary photographer and a transgender man. I was born and raised in Manila, a place that shaped who I am now. As for my queerness, I've always been trans. I can't recall a time that I wasn't, even when I didn't have words for it yet. I remember seeing my childhood through my mom's photo albums. I had shorter hair, wore mostly blue clothes, and played with a lot of Lego ships and action figures. I felt different than most girls my age, who liked having long hair, pink things, and played with lots of Barbie dolls. But it hit hardest when puberty came. My chest was getting bigger, my hips were getting wider, my body suddenly grew these unwelcome additions like weeds sprouting in a landscape garden. I cried when my mom introduced me to the baby bra. Later on, I would learn the word tomboy, a word I used to describe myself. It was the only word I knew of that made sense to me and to everyone else. So for more than half of my life, I called myself a tomboy. But 7 years ago, when I was 23, I learned of the word transgender. It was through a YouTube video I randomly saw on my feed. I saw a white bearded man documenting himself saying, "This is my voice, 3 years on testosterone." So I got curious and I saw he had more videos of himself. In the first one, we looked alike. Soft and delicate features, a higher pitched voice, and no facial hair. So moving through his timeline, I witnessed a transformation. His shoulders broadened, his voice deepened, and a glow of joy was written on his face. The words transgender and gender transitioning weren't part of my vocabulary then. In an attempt to understand what these words meant, I watched more trans people documenting their bodies changing into a gender expression that they prefer to have. All those journeys I watched, shared over the internet, gave me a glimmer of hope. Being shown these possibilities of how to live my life meant everything to me. And if I could go back, I'll tell my younger self who was forced to wear baby bras that they don't have to conform to society's gender expectations, that they can embrace their true identity, which is a fundamental part of who we are. So 7 years ago was also when I became a documentary photographer. I captured lesser known stories that many people don't often hear about and don't usually make it to the front page of the news. So the first place I went to is Mindanao. It is 1,000 miles and a 2-hour flight away from Manila. So I met the Lumad. They are an indigenous community whose culture was entirely new to me. So being on field, I learned to fade into the background, to observe quietly so that I don't disrupt the moments I'm trying to capture. I did my best not to make my presence felt. But one day, I mustered up the courage and asked a question that might be risky or unusual. So I approached one of their leaders and asked if there are indigenous people among them who are queer, just like me. So through that question, I met queer Lumad people who welcomed my presence to let me capture a more intimate and personal and familiar narrative. We were both amazed at how unlikely it is to meet each other as queer people who grew up from very different cultures. So, throughout our connection, I discovered how shared experiences could exist even in distant places beyond Manila. That a safe space is created by embracing curiosity and our gender identities, even though we have different words for it. So, came the pandemic. We were all at home, and without an opportunity to go back to Mindanao, I had to stay home mostly by myself. It's sad because I love engaging with people and amplifying their stories. But this was when I realized that it had become a reason for me to delay pursuing my own. That I've been minimizing my own narrative as if my story wasn't important too. Every June, we celebrate Pride Month in the Philippines. For the 7 Pride months that have passed, I wasn't sure if I was living my authentic self. So what does pride truly mean? Is it possible to feel proud in a body that didn't feel like mine? Can I be proud of myself even before learning to accept my gender identity? It was challenging to identify as trans and much more to come out as a trans man, to the point that I could no longer imagine a future being in this body. It took me 7 years to be able to say it out loud. I am a trans man, and deciding to transition 7 months ago is the greatest euphoria I have ever experienced in my life. I now feel less and less agony in this body. I'm marching towards a place I can now call home. I'm not just a trans man, I embody it. I claim my space in this shared reality. I think about the trans men documenting their journey and how these people whom I've never met helped me connect myself to my own identity. I think about the queer Lumad that I've actually met and shared nuanced and familiar stories through a question I just simply asked. How visibility can lead others to do the same, to witness each other's journey through a lens or not. Only when we speak up and share our stories do we realize how we are all deeply connected to one another through our intricate experiences. So my decision to come out has saved my life. But there are also others who aren't as lucky as I am. Some may not have that social safety for them to come out. Some don't have access to trans healthcare to be able to live as their authentic selves. Coming out puts us at the risk of gender-based violence in a world fraught with transphobia. How can we celebrate pride when so many of us turn into statistics and become violent headlines in the news, whose stories often get sensationalized only to be forgotten? We should always remember that pride is a protest. Many of us in our community can't even talk about pride because we are still fighting to be seen and not forgotten. If my story makes just one person in this room feel reassured that they're not alone and haven't found words that best align with their reality, please know that you are not any less valid, that your experience isn't any less real. For those who already feel at home in their gender identity, I hope these stories and connections serve as reminders that we are capable to create spaces for others to feel seen. Even if the language isn't there yet, the spaces already are. Thank you.